Hi, everyone. Thanks
Hello.
for showing up. Thanks for saying hi. Um, I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Rhodes College and the Paying for College 101 group. I am just going to mute a few people who may be unmuted. So these are meetings as opposed to pure webinars. And if you like, or it's nice to see people on video. If you want to put yourself on video, if you don't, I completely understand. If you do have a question at some point and you want to ask your question live, that's fine to unmute yourself. It's just best if you don't have anything to say to keep it muted so that we don't hear background noise. And this is recorded, and we'll send out a link to the recording tomorrow. Let's see, to get started, I'd love, I do have slides that I'm going to walk through, but if people can share a little bit about themselves, where they're watching, zooming from. I'm sure you probably have a rising senior. That's why you're here, but there might be people with kids in who are maybe rising juniors or even younger in high school. Love to know that. And give me a sense of where you are in the process. So have you started building a college list? Have you done research? Maybe you're just here, you want to confirm that you've already done it and you're not missing anything, but just kind of curious where people are. Great. So some people are just starting, overwhelmed, beginning the process. Yes, this is a crazy process, which can be overwhelming, unfortunately. Okay. Good, thanks. Some people from here all over the place. So, and this is actually just a curiosity. I don't know if you're willing to share. For the people who are just starting, had you thought about starting earlier and you just kept putting it off because it was summer, or you just weren't like really aware of when the right time is to start? I'm really it's just out of curiosity to kind of help people understand maybe when is the right time to start. So. Yes, thought about it, but it is overwhelming. Yep, just starting because my kid is only a rising sophomore. Yes, so you are early to the game. So for you to say just starting is not a big deal. It's really a little bit more the people who are saying just starting and they have the rising senior because they're probably starting to feel the pressure of having to get things done before school starts. My child is dragging their feet. That's a big one, of course. Okay, yes, people want to get in for the early action deadlines, which you should want to do that, and I'm glad you're aware of that. Yes, we are just overwhelmed and my son is in analysis paralysis. I completely understand. I feel like we are late. I wish I knew what I know now a year ago. Yes, Daniela, I'd love to have a conversation with you to help you or help people understand like all this that they finally know, because the earlier you know it, the better. Okay, well, thanks for sharing all of that information. So today I'm going to talk, it's a combination about merit scholarships, and I'll tell you why we focus so heavily on that, and then building a college list. And most people these days need to figure out where they're going to get money for college and incorporate that into as they build a college list. Early action's on our table to many schools. And we'll talk about the deadlines because early action and applying early is important. Okay, so let me share my screen and I will get started. Feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. I'll try and look over as we're going through this. I tried, because this is, during the day, most people, I mean, we have lots of different time zones here, but I try and get this done within the hour. Sometimes if I do these at night, we kind of go a little longer, but so I might go fast, but hopefully I can get through everybody's questions. Okay, let's share screen. And let me get the chat back up. Okay, if you could just make sure if you can. Nobody's on video, so you can't do a thumbs up, but just put into chat that you can see the screen. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen because I sometimes have too many things open on my on laptop. Great, thank you. Okay. Let's get going. So I think we just did an intro. I'm gonna the agenda is I'm going to talk to you about what merit scholarships are, why it's important to know different numbers as you're doing this process, what the SAI is, what your college budget is, tips for how you can build a balanced college list, a tool that we have if you want to use it, and other research techniques. So I mentioned that, I focus a lot on merit scholarships. It's also tied into how to pay for college, right? Your student's college list is ultimately going to determine the final costs of college for your family. And there's only so many ways that you can get money to pay for college. And so here's just a simplified version of what like the three major buckets are that people use to pay for college. One is, family contributions. Hopefully you've been able to save something. I know that varies from family to family, but usually families come with some sort of savings that they can contribute to paying for college. And then another part of family contribution could be coming from relatives, but it could be also just from cash flowing income. We make trade-offs. We look at our family budget. Are there ways to cut back so that we can pay more towards college? But ultimately those are the two biggest ways that we can get money from the family to contribute to college. The second bucket, which is really what we're going to focus on today, is free money, right? We want to find as much money that we can get that we don't have to pay back, or it's not going to be in the form of a loan. And the biggest sources of free money are going to come in the form of financial aid. And that could be financial aid a little bit from the government, probably a lot more from the colleges, and merit scholarships, which comes from the colleges. So that this big bucket of free money is going to come from the college that your student ultimately attends. And the school that your student ultimately attend can only come from the lists of colleges that they apply to. So that's why this college list becomes so important. There are private scholarships. And I'll just tell you my 2 cents about private scholarships. It's not that they are bad. It's all about we only have so much time. And so where should you put your effort? I believe that families should put their biggest effort towards finding the right college that can offer their student money or is at the right price. And then if there's time after, finding the college that can fit your budget. If there's additional time that your student wants to spend on private scholarships, then go ahead. It just is an effort that needs to have a strategy because it's very time intensive and it's numbers oriented. So you have to send out, honestly, a fair number of applications or apply to a fair number of private scholarships before you're going to get a return on potentially any money. So that's just one issue with private scholarships. The second issue is that most private scholarships are not renewable. So whatever effort your student does for 1 year to get private scholarships, they're going to have to go through that same effort in subsequent years to keep getting the same amount of money. So again, not that it's bad. I just personally put it a little lower on the priority and really get students and families to focus on their college lists and colleges that can offer merit scholarships first, because the largest scholarship your student is going to get is most likely going to be from the college they attend. So that's why this effort is so important about the college list and finding colleges that can offer money, whether it's in need-based aid or merit scholarships. And then the last bucket is borrowed money. And I don't want people to focus on it a lot now, but it actually is important for you to understand how much money students can borrow on their own. And if you need to borrow more than what students can borrow on their own, kind of who is going to need to be involved in that process. And we are going through that, or we kind of have been going through these discussions about loans and student loans from the government and private student loans from private organizations and banks with families with students who are going into college. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty about that process. But a lot of people say, and kind of just as somebody already said in the chat, I wish I had known that earlier. So it is kind of important to know a little bit about the maximum your student's going to be able to borrow from the federal government, and then how much you're going to have to be involved financially for your student to take out more money than they can take out on their own. And just as a quick number, your student in freshman year is only going to be able to borrow $5,500 from the government on their own. Anything above that, you're going to have to be involved as a cosigner on a loan. In total, your student can borrow, it's about $28,000 from the federal government. There's actually a max of, I think it's about $31,500, but that's if they go for 5 years, or if they have other issues that they can borrow beyond the 4 years. So just think about that. So your student can only borrow on their own $5,500 freshman year, $6,500 sophomore year, and $7,500 for junior and senior year. Any other money beyond that you're going to need to pay for college because you don't have enough from your family contribution, and maybe you're not getting enough in free money, that's going to have to come in some sort of a loan. And there are government loans that parents can take out, and then the other option are private loans. But the point is, any money beyond what your student can borrow on their own, you as a parent or another financially secure adult is going to have to be involved for your student to get that money. So this is just a summary of what I've been talking about why the college list is so important, because it's going to drive your ultimate final cost of what college costs you. I said it before, but I'll quickly repeat it. The college a student attends, right, or ultimately decides to enroll in, can only be a college that they apply to. The colleges that they apply to are going to be the colleges that are on your student's list. So, this is the most important stage in the process. What's on this college list? Because that's going to drive all these other results. The other thing that people kind of don't always think about, but if you're a family with a rising senior, you might be starting to feel the heat about this now, is the amount of work it takes to fill out these applications. And that usually comes down to essays. There is the Common App, which has one common personal statement essay, but as you dig deeper, you find that a lot of schools have additional essays. They'll have supplemental essays. They will have essays if your student is applying for some of these additional scholarships. And so the schools that are on your student's list can sometimes add up to 10, 15 essays, which just takes time. So that's why I know it feels like maybe we hype it, but I feel, I don't really think we do, but we've just been through it so many times. The earlier families start in understanding the list of colleges that the student might apply to, and then how that translates into the number of essays they need to write, is just helpful, because students who start earlier, just have more time to do a better job on their essays, and they don't feel rushed. And then, of course, when school starts, whether your school starts in the middle of August or beginning of September, there's a whole nother layer of distractions and commitments that your student's going to have, starting their senior year, and activities and all those other time commitments that just get layered on top of having to do the college admissions work. That's why we hopefully, nicely encourage families to start as early as they can in the summer and try and get as much done before school starts. Okay. Probably if you're a member of the Paying for College 101 Facebook group, or just, starting to dig into college admissions in general, you've heard a lot about merit. It can be, some people call it merit aid, other people call it merit scholarships. Another way of looking at it, to be really blunt and crude, is it is a tuition discount. And how colleges use this term and how they use the money, I think, varies in whether some of the colleges look at it as aid versus a scholarship versus a discount. And we'll look at some of the numbers and examples of colleges, but there are colleges that give a merit award to every student who applies who does not have financial need. When you apply to a college is going to look and say, do you have some financial need, and that's going to be based on the FAFSA, and I'm going to go into this in more detail, or do you have no financial need, at least as determined by the government and by the financial aid calculations? And so if you don't have financial need, the only way the college can give you money is based on merit. Some colleges give everybody a little, scholarship. It's kind of like the Oprah show, like everyone's a winner, we're giving out something to everybody in the audience. So in that case, it really is like it kind of feels like you're shopping at Kohl's where everybody gets a discount. And so there are some colleges who really operate that way. And there are other colleges that give out merit, but they only give it out because they're trying to attract a certain student to their school. So they're trying to attract maybe a student that has a better academic profiles, because the stronger the academic student that they can attract to their school, ultimately the college's profile increases in the ranking. So, that might be a reason why they're going to give a certain student scholarship money. Other schools, make students apply for the merit scholarship. So there's different ways that colleges give out the money. And this is where the research is going to have to come in for you as a parent and your student to understand the different types of colleges, how they give out their money, and then if there are any additional steps that the student needs to take to apply for some of that merit scholarship money. The good thing about merit money, and this is why it's so important to focus on it as an incoming freshman, the majority of colleges give out the most of their merit scholarship money, as part of this admissions process. So as an incoming freshman, there are colleges that still give merit money, and more merit money throughout the different years of college, but it's just they have a smaller pool of money that they're working with. So, but if your student gets a merit scholarship as part of this, admissions process as part of their start of college, that money is generally renewable. So whatever the scholarship is, they will get it for all 4 years of college, which is a big difference than what I mentioned with private scholarships. So that's a plus for why students want to get merit scholarship money. The little caveat to that, and this is something that you'll probably need to pay more attention to when your student actually gets offers of merit scholarship money, is that there is most likely some sort of a requirement to make sure that the scholarship renews each year. It's usually a minimum GPA requirement. That can vary school to school. I've seen some schools where it's kind of easy. It's a small hurdle. It's just making sure that the student gets a 3.0 every year, and then that scholarship will continue. Other schools do make it a little bit more stringent. I have seen some merit scholarship money that is only renewable if the student gets a minimum GPA of 3.5. That can be risky and tricky, particularly for freshmen who, might have been and, is still a good student, but there's a lot of transition issues that happen freshman year. So at some point, it's going to probably be, when your student gets offers, you're going to need to pay attention to what that minimum GPA is and feel comfortable that your student can achieve it to make sure that the scholarship renews each year. The advice I give is that it's a horrible situation to be in, and we've worked with families where students are sometimes in this situation where the family has chosen a school that the student's going to attend, and that school was affordable because the student received merit scholarship money. But then for whatever reason, the student wasn't able to meet the minimum requirements for that merit scholarship money. And in junior year, they lose the money. And all of a sudden that affordable school went to unaffordable, and at a really inopportune time where it becomes very difficult for a student to transfer. So that's why it's important to understand what the requirements are. And just one other little, it's not a caveat, it's an important point, is that whatever the scholarship dollar amount is, whatever it could be, 20,000, 15,000, 25,000, that's usually going to be a flat amount for the 4 years that your student goes to college. But unfortunately, college tuition is going to increase each year that your student's attending. And so I just make this point because if your projecting out the total costs of college, which I hope families are, but that's probably another session that we can go through about how to do that. You're gonna, have this flat line of what the merit scholarship dollar amount is going to be for every year, but you're going to put in some sort of assumptions for an increase in tuition. So the tuition increase is unfortunately going to eat away at the money that the student's going to get at with a merit scholarship. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at total costs. So there are these groupings of merit scholarships aren't anything formal or official. They're just categories that we've created over the years as we've talked about different types of merit scholarships. We've generally found that scholarships fall into these three buckets. There are automatic merit scholarships, and competitive, and talent. And what automatic means is that the college isn't asking your student to do anything in addition to applying. And once the student has applied, that college is looking at all of the applications that come through, and they are seeing whether or not they are kind of within some sort of GPA or test score boundary, and they're going to award the merit scholarships based on looking at all of the students that apply. And so the automatic refers to the fact that the college will automatically look at all the applications that come through to decide whether or not that student should be awarded merit scholarship. Most of the cases, I'm going to show you some examples, those schools are looking at some combination of a GPA and test score to award those scholarships. The competitive merit scholarship is kind of what the word implies, based on some little bit more of additional steps that the student needs to take. In most cases, it could be a separate and additional application in addition to the Common App. In a lot of cases, it's another essay. So this is where sometimes essays can start to build up. When some colleges, as part of the upfront application process, that there's an additional application that the student needs to fill out as part of the merit scholarship process. So that's probably, pretty clear on their website, and it's again all upfront. Other schools invite students to apply to merit scholarships after they send in their applications. Those usually come, in the January timeframe. And I only say that because we've had some students, and I understand they feel a little burnt out by January. And so they kind of think, well, should I really fill this out? Should I, do I really want to do another essay? And I know it's hard to kind of keep pushing them, but it is important, in those cases, if they've been invited to fill out, to apply for another application or another merit scholarship, I always try and encourage to do it, unless you've got some other great option, and it's not going to matter if they get this merit scholarship or not. So I just kind of point that out, the different times that your student might be aware that there's more work to be done for competitive merit scholarships. And the last is related to students who have, this is not related to athletic scholarships. Actually, none of what I'm talking about today really relates to athletic scholarships. That's a whole nother bailiwick of a process. This talent, it relates to, if there's music, art, theater that your student is going for. And these types of scholarships generally have specific deadlines. The deadlines usually relate to when maybe a portfolio needs to be submitted, or if you have to make an appointment for an audition. So, these are obviously forms of competitive merit scholarships, but they're focused on students with specific talents. And you notice at the bottom that I kind of put in bold, deadlines are really important. If there's one thing that your student gets out of this process, it's the importance of understanding what a deadline is for a process and keeping track of that deadline and planning towards that deadline. Because most colleges, I don't want to say all, but most colleges are kind of not forgiving about deadlines. So, you can't kind of reach out a month later and say, oh, I really wanted to apply for that scholarship, but the application was a month ago. So that's like a big lesson that I think a lot of students kind of get out of this process is managing their time and keeping track of deadlines. Okay, I see there's some questions. Let me get through the next slide and then I'll look at the questions. So here's an example of a school that gives automatic merit scholarship. This is Miami University in Ohio. Another kind of well-known school that does something very similar is University of Alabama. And the schools that offer automatic merit scholarships, this is not every school, but a lot of them tend to have some sort of chart, some sort of table on their website that outlines, what the criteria is. They're not these types. I mean, in my mind, these are the like A+ schools in terms of being as transparent as possible about how they go through the process. They are saying, here's our criteria. Your student fits this criteria. Your student's going to get this amount of money. And if you can find these types of schools that relate to where the location that your student wants to go to, or that they have the program that your student wants, it's a little easier applying and knowing what the outcome's going to be. So this, and as an example, I've been keeping track of Miami University since actually right before the pandemic, and you can see at the bottom right, this is from 2020. Their chart used to include both test scores and GPA. And the other reason why I show this progression of the change of their chart is obviously we ran into COVID. Most schools went test optional, and so they took off test scores from their chart, and they kind of remained that way. But the other thing that you can see in the progression of the chart is that they've changed the cutoffs, right? So it used to be a 3.5 GPA. When they took away test scores, they increased the GPA to a 3.95. Now it's up to their highest level is a 4.3. So colleges every year are going to, manipulate or fiddle with their levels. They're going to fiddle with the criteria around each level, and they're going to also, fiddle with the dollar amounts that they're going to offer. So colleges work with consultants called enrollment management consultants who are always looking at the results. So what happened last year? This was the criteria we used. This was the money we offered, and what were the results? Did we get the enrollment we needed? Did we get students with the academic profile that we wanted? Did we get enough revenue in based on the students that decided to enroll, and how much merit scholarship money we offered them? What colleges are ultimately looking at is something called net tuition revenue, right? Because you could say the retail price of a college is $80,000, but if the school's giving you $30,000, then they're only going to net the $50,000. So ultimately, they're looking at all of these numbers and deciding was their approach working last year, or do they need to change anything? So that's why you see these changes from year to year. The other thing I like to point out in this example is that this chart is based on a weighted GPA. Most colleges are using the unweighted GPA, but the most important thing is just to find out what they are using. So if they don't specify, Miami University happens to make a footnote and tell you that it's the weighted GPA. So that's important and good to know. If there isn't anything on a school's chart and they have a chart like this, but they don't say if it's a weighted GPA or unweighted GPA, then your student needs to ask. And it's a great question that your student can send to an admissions officer. And it's just a way for their student to engage with the admissions team. And you need to know, right? You need to know if you should be looking at your students' weighted or unweighted GPA, because it's going to make a difference on what tier your student might land if they choose to apply to one of these schools. Okay, let me check. So question about how to calculate the unweighted GPA. I don't know necessarily what ranking your school uses, but you want to, for an unweighted GPA, you want to just be looking at the core subjects that the colleges are going to look at, which, are your math, science, English, language, history. And you should also find out if your school is calculating a weighted or unweighted GPA and what GPA is going to be shown on the transcript that your student sends to the college. So, so good question. There are also, honestly, I would just Google, how to calculate an unweighted GPA, which will help you do the translation from whatever, structure your school has. But good that you're thinking about that. Okay, let me just scroll back a little bit. Is this chart showing grade inflation, or is it showing weighted GPA 2025 versus unweighted 2020? That's a good question. There is definitely grade inflation that's happening across the country. No, this is weighted GPA from 2020 to 2025, and it just shows how they changed their criteria of what they were looking at. Is the weighted GPA based on 9th through 11th grade? Good question. Yes. Yes, it is. So, you don't have grades for your students' 12th grade when they're applying. So the GPA is really 9th through 11th grade, which is another thing. If you're here and your student is from a younger grade, I think we don't really, we kind of don't realize that. I mean, 12th grade is important, but it doesn't always get factored in as much as 9th through 11th grade. So, so keep that in mind. Okay, the elephant in the room, pervasive, yes, grade inflation. Are schools factoring this into merit aid? It's a really good question, and it is an issue. And, for people who to some extent are, supporters of tests, that's why they think that it's important to have standardized tests along with grades. I don't have a clear-cut answer to you. I don't necessarily think that all colleges are factoring that in. So what I mean by that is, if a college has a pretty strict, chart like this, and these are great questions to be asking admissions officers. But if a college has a chart like this, they're looking at unweighted GPA, they're not going to factor in, oh, my student took the AP, so they got that's really a different score if you weight it. And sometimes students who really are focused on merit scholarship and they're focused on it early enough tend to take as rigorous a class as they can, but they are very mindful of the grade that they're going to get in. So they might kind of pick and choose, certain classes to make sure that they get the highest unweighted GPA that they can get. So it's a great question. It's a trade-off. This idea of a rigorous class schedule is important, but it's really much more important for selective colleges who aren't giving out merit. So there's always this tension between applying to schools that offer merit and applying to, the really highly selective schools, which are only need-based aid. So it's definitely a conflict. How do we research how a school gives aid? We're going to talk about that. It's really through the common data set. So I don't know if anybody mentioned that. I'm curious in the chat, how many people have heard about what the common data set, how many people have looked at what a common data set looks like? Have looked. I encourage everybody to take a look at a common data set. And the easiest thing you can do is take any school that your student is interested in. I'm just using this as an example. If you Google the school's name and the word common data set. So, Tulane, if you did Tulane common data set, you're going to get a link to a page on Tulane's website that could be just this year's common data set, or it could be links for the past 10 years. Somebody mentioned, I just saw quickly, is this the same thing as the College Navigator? So it is not. It's similar, but let me explain that really quickly. The College Navigator, for anybody who's not familiar, is the public-facing website for government data. So government data is called iPads, and the College Navigator is the URL that you can use, and it's a little easier search capability to access the government's data. So so the College Navigator website uses iPads data. iPads data is similar to common dataset data, but it is still different. Common dataset data has more data than what's in the government iPads. And the other difference is a timing difference. So right now, this month is when colleges start to release more of their common data set information. And so the common data set information is based on last year's, it's based on the class that entered college this past fall, the fall of 2023. I always have to think about these years. So, and the information in the College Navigator in the government, it's usually like a year behind that. It's just a lag in data. You know, like we can't have immediate data when we're dealing with so many colleges and so many pieces of data. So, you know, you might be able to look at this past year's admission rates, but you're not going to be able to get all of the comparable data, you know, that you're going to need that relates to this past year's, because colleges just have not compiled it yet. So, so if it's this year's common data set, it's actually based on the students who are enrolling, who just enrolled in the fall of 2023. Okay, let me keep going so I can get through as much as I can in the hour. Here's an example of competitive merit scholarships. This is, I bring out these two examples, again, kind of to show deadlines. The first example is from University of Southern California, USC. So in previous years, USC actually did not have an early admission deadline. They only had a regular decision deadline, and their deadline was December 1st. But they had a separate deadline for merit if you wanted to apply for merit scholarship. So you had to apply by November 1st if you wanted to be considered for merit scholarships. I think it was 2 years ago that they actually started an early admission deadline. And so their early admission deadline is also November 1st. So really, if you want to apply for merit scholarships at USC, you have to apply early action November 1st. If you miss that deadline and you apply, you can apply December 1st. That's fine, but you will not be considered for merit scholarship. So here's an example where understanding the deadline is really important if you want to make sure that you're being considered for merit scholarships.
Subaru and auto retailers are there to help by giving millions.
Sorry, if that person can mute themselves, thanks. Okay.
To be the largest corporate supporter of adopted
Just mute.
It's just
Okay, thanks. So the example on the right is from Boston University. Again, I just wanted to share because it's an example where their deadline for merit scholarships is different than their regular decision and early action deadlines. Their deadline is November 1st. Yep, oops, sorry. The other reason I highlight it is that I just wanted to show, and somebody asked this in the questions, like, what about test scores? This is another important question to either look for it on the website or ask the college admissions officers specifically, you know, how much do test scores play into merit scholarships? Some colleges will say it doesn't matter, we're only looking at GPA. Other colleges will say we're test optional, but if you want to apply for merit scholarships, we do ask for merit scholarships as part of, we do ask for test scores as part of the merit scholarship process. So I wish that there was just like, you know, one set of processes that colleges went by, or even just like two, but each one has their own way of doing things. And so you have to ask, you know, each college to make sure that, you know, what process they're following. So here's an example. BU they don't require test scores, but they're kind of hinting that the type of student that they generally accept for merit, and these students have high test scores, whether it's SAT or ACT. So again, they kind of leave it open. You don't have to have a test score to apply, but you probably have to have enough academic rigor and enough other things to show that you're of that caliber of a student who might have gotten a 1500 or a 33 on their ACT. Okay, I'm going to keep going. This section, I talk about numbers. So it's important to research colleges. It's important to understand merit scholarships. It's important to understand which colleges can offer merit scholarships, but it's also important to understand your family's numbers. And the numbers that are important for your family are your SAI, which is the Student Aid Index, and your family's budget of how much you can afford to pay for college. The other number to understand is the school's cost of attendance. The COA, cost of attendance, is on the school's website. It's in the tool that we have, but to tell you the truth, again, this month of August is a transition month in terms of data. Colleges have just probably set their new tuitions for the coming year. A lot of those tuitions are set in July because they have to set them before they're sending out the bills to the students who just graduated, who are starting in the fall. And so, a lot of websites like R2C and other websites, we're first now getting and updating all of our cost of attendance information. So I only say that because ultimately a lot of these, a lot of the research can kind of narrow down your choices, but the ultimate source of correct information is always going to be the college, is always going to be the college's website. So, we might have a cost of attendance and it's close to, accurate, but the most accurate, cost of attendance number is always going to be in the college, and they are constantly changing things, which a lot of websites or tools like ours, we can't always catch exactly, at the moment that they make the change. But in any case, the numbers that I'm kind of showing here is to help families understand whether or not they have need, or if they don't have need, financial need at a college. For anybody who wants to know what their student aid index is, that number, you can Google. Actually, the government has a SAI estimator. I would just honestly Google federal SAI calculator, and you will get the link. This will give you an estimate of what the FAFSA is ultimately going to calculate. So the FAFSA generates your SAI. You won't be filling out the FAFSA until October of this coming year, but there are definitely tools out there that can give you an estimate of what your SAI will be close to. For colleges that only use the FAFSA as their form of financial aid, understanding what your SAI is going to be pretty accurate, and you can use it in the process. Other colleges use the CSS profile, which asks for a lot more financial data than what the the FAFSA does. Usually, the numbers related to the CSS profile come in higher than your SAI, and the best calculators to use for those schools are the school's net price calculator. So any school that your student is considering applying to, I highly encourage everybody to use the net price calculator. I encourage you to use it, but I can't encourage you to kind of view it as gospel. I kind of look at all of this information as directional. Some colleges' net price calculators are really accurate and some are not. So I would take it with the more information that the net price calculator is asking you about, and particularly if they ask for grades and test scores, then probably the more likely the outcome is going to be accurate. But always take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Always assume that there could be a margin of $5,000 to even $10,000. So kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at that net price calculator results. And then write it down, keep track of the net price calculator. And I would even screenshot whatever information you use to include on the calculator. But getting back to this slide, It's important for you as a family to know what your SAI is and if you have financial need or not. And if you have financial need, it's going to vary at each school. And the reason why it varies is that the financial need is based on the college's cost of attendance. So in the first example on the left, this is a family that has an SAI of $30,000. You can see at each of the two schools that they might be looking at, they are going to have financial need, but their amount of financial need is going to vary because the first school has a cost of attendance of $50,000 and the second school has a cost of attendance of $80,000. That family's SAI stays the same at each school. So the first school, they have a financial need of $20,000, and at the second school, they have a financial need of $50,000. Again, they have financial need, but how big their financial need is going to vary, and how much that school is willing to meet the financial need of that family is also going to vary. But at least this family understands that they might need to look for schools that are willing to give need-based aid, because they're going to show up as having need at a lot of schools. The example on the right is a family, and I just picked an SAI of $90,000, which a lot of families will probably have that high of an SAI or maybe even higher, since a big majority of the calculation of SAI is based on your family's adjusted gross income. But if you have an SAI of 90,000, your SAI is going to be higher than the majority of colleges' cost of attendances that are out there. But the example I just showed here, again, in the first example, this is a college that has a cost of attendance of 40,000. By definition, because this family's SAI is above the 40,000, they have no need, right? And even in this second example, the cost of attendance is 80,000. Because their SAI is higher than a cost of attendance, this family is not going to have any financial need. So if this family wants to reduce their costs of college, they have to find colleges that are going to offer their student merit scholarships, because the schools are not going to offer any need-based aid. In fact, at these schools, the school is going to expect this family to pay the retail price, so the sticker price. So, in the first case, the sticker price is 40,000. In the second case, it's 80,000. And again, because they have no financial need, that's what the school is going to expect, unless the school is willing to give that student merit scholarship money. And the last number that's important is what is your family's budget, right? So you can have, your SAI at this point, particularly if you're a family with a rising senior, there's not much you can do to impact that SAI. You can move, when you understand a little bit more about the calculation, maybe you can move some of investments around, maybe you can shift money that's in your student's name into your name. It's going to make a difference, but honestly, it's going to be a minor impact on what the SAI is, because the SAI focuses so much on your household income. So at this point in the game for those rising seniors, your SAI is kind of set. If you're someone here, I think I remember earlier on there was a rising sophomore, I encourage you to go out and find your SAI, because you still have time to make an impact on how that calculation will be calculated. So you can make an impact, but a lot of the families here can't at this point. So your SAI is going to be what it is, but you can still come up with what your family's budget is, and it doesn't have to be what your SAI is. And let me give you a quick example. We worked with a family last year who the father had a very good earning. His SAI was over 100,000. So he knew that most schools, he wasn't going to be eligible for any need-based aid. He was going to have to pay sticker price at most schools, unless he could find a school where his student was going to get merit. And even though in theory, and he would have admitted it, maybe he could pay for the sticker price at the school, his student wanted to go on to medical school. He had another child with a disability, and he was also supporting an elderly mother. So these are all these other expenses that may not be known to a college. So even though his SAI was high, he felt that he only wanted to spend a certain amount for undergraduate, because he wanted to leave enough money for his daughter to actually use for medical school. So, in his case, he set a budget of $50,000, even though in theory he could have afforded more. So, what your budget is going to be, based on your value of education, what you're willing to pay towards education, how much you have that you're willing to take from your savings. I can't tell you what that number is. Only you as your family can kind of look at your situation and decide. But I highly encourage you to figure out what that number is now before you go through the process. Because if you don't know what that number is, and then your student gets into colleges and the costs of the colleges don't match your budget, you just have less options later on in the process. So figure out what your family's budget is. Let me give this example here. This is the family that had an SAI of 90,000, but they felt that they only wanted to spend 45,000 as their budget. Can they make it? Maybe yes, maybe no. There's always going to be trade-offs, right, in this process. So obviously, the first example, they were able to find a school that just the total cost of attendance was less than their budget. So, in theory, we can consider that a affordable college. The next example is a college that had a cost of attendance that was 80,000, but it was a college that offered merit scholarships. And it was a college where that student had a very good chance of getting merit scholarships. So in this case, to help get closer to the $45,000 budget, they found a school that had the potential of offering their student $25,000 in merit scholarships. They were willing to take out some loans, or they knew that the student was going to be able to take out the federal loans, and those were the dollar amounts that I told you at the beginning. And then they have to decide whether or not they want to make up that difference. But at least they were knowledgeable ahead, and all of this can be figured out before your student even applies to the college. So I can't guarantee that you can figure out a precise dollar of what the college is going to cost before your student applies. But again, you should be able, at a minimum, to get within a $5,000, maybe at the outside, a $10,000 cost of what that college is going to be for you before your student applies. And so I keep emphasizing that, because this is the research that as a parent, you're most likely going to need to do, because it's, just over the heads of most students. Okay. I'm running out of time quickly, so I'm going to skip ahead and honestly go quickly to the tool that we have, and then I'll go to questions in the that I see here. We built a tool. It's called it's actually called Insights. I had to take a word away, the college, but in front of it. But and it's it takes data from the college's common data sets. And we also pull in information from iPads. And then the third piece of information has what we call crowdsourced data. And this is offers that we've been asking over the past 5 years. It's been families to share their offers that they get with colleges. So colleges tell you what they might offer in terms of merit scholarships, but then we also ask families to say, what did you actually get? And so we have that information, so you can see, at a particular school, if your student is interested in, you can pull up what the merit scholarship offers were that students at that school received this past year, and actually as far back as we have the data. So it can, go back for the past like 5 years or so. Let me quickly show you what Insights looks like. You can create a free account and you get some sort of capabilities, and then if you pay, there's either a monthly or a annual version, you get full access to the tool that you can filter colleges based on all the data that we have, and you can create different lists, which is helpful in this process of creating a college list. Okay, let me get to a different tab, and let me pull this up. Let me make sure I am sharing the correct page. Yep. Okay. Okay. So it's insights.roadtocollege.com. I'll put it in the chat. I'm really sorry if I've gone quickly. I'm just trying to get in as much as I can in the hour. And actually, I think you know what? I think I already have this up. Let me go to a different tab. Sorry. Yeah. Nope. Sorry. Here it is. Okay. So this is, I've already logged into Insights. If you guys can just show me, tell me if you're seeing my screen correctly, that I'm on the right tab. Yes, great. Okay. So again, you'll go to the landing page, either you create a new account, or if you have a free account, you can sign in. If you, once you sign in, actually, you'll come to this page. And here you can type in a specific college that you might be interested in. And then it pulls up the college page. Or if you want to do more in-depth search, I would go to Power Search. And let me just show you quickly how this works and how you can narrow down. The other piece of advice, which I kind of ran through, and I actually didn't even say, it was on one of the slides, is that I really encourage families to start the process with as few maybe like restrictions or requirements that be as open-minded and cast as wide of a net as you're willing to, if you want to find a college that can offer you student merit scholarships. Because I hear it all the time, families or students end up at a college that the family never even heard of when they started this process, because they were open-minded. And they obviously affordability was important on that family's list. And so if affordability is important, you kind of have to make a trade-off with other things, and that other things might be location, might be the size of the school. So when I encourage families to start researching or start filtering, honestly, I got to tell you, the most important thing I would say is to go down on the side here and search schools based on test scores. I know that this is a little hard, is particularly if your student might be applying test optional, but the reality is that colleges still share the most information that they have based on test scores. Even though they say GPA is more important, and I do really believe that that is the case, majority of colleges do not share enough information about their GPA and the breakdown of their GPA for us meaning not just this tool, most websites, to be able to help families filter. So colleges are going to offer merit scholarships to the academically strong students. They're going to offer merit scholarships to the student that is at what we call the 75th percentile of that school's academic range. And most of that, from a search perspective, is going to be based on test scores. It doesn't mean your student has to apply with their test scores. It doesn't even mean maybe your student didn't take a test. If your student didn't take a test, what I would recommend is to convert their GPA into what would be the possible tests that they might have gotten if they took a test. So, and you honestly, you can Google this. Prep Scholar has some great charts. If you Google GPA to ACT conversion, they have a chart, and you can see what your student's GPA is and kind of get an idea of what type of ACT that they might have gotten. So let me just quickly show you. If we're going to search by SAT, I'll just pick a range of like 1,200 to 1,300. Okay, 1,200. Okay, and then again, if you're searching for merit scholarships, you want to pick the schools where that SAT range is in the top 75th percentile. You can search by average. Average will just show you the schools where this test score is in the 50th percentile. And if your student's scores GPA are in the 50th percentile, it means that they have a good chance to be accepted. It doesn't mean they have a good chance of getting merit scholarships. Students need to be at that top academic range to be really receiving the merit scholarships at those schools. So that's why I would pick searching this range by the top range, 75th percentile. Now, all of these schools, there's 293 schools that have a test score range of 1,200 to 1,300 that is that school's 75th percentile or above. But now it doesn't mean that each of these schools offer merit. You can then use the sort capability. So of these 293 schools, I'm going to sort them by average merit aid. So now I can see, and it's showing me from largest to smallest, which schools offer merit. So you can see here, Susquehanna offers $36,000 in average merit. So average, that's going to mean that some students are going to give a little less, and some students are going to give a little bit more. But if your student applies to Susquehanna, they have an SAT of 1,200 to 1,300. They write a good essay. They probably have a good chance of being accepted and getting merit scholarship money. And now you can start to estimate. We have Susquehanna's private, their cost of attendance is, let's just round it off, 70,000. So if your student gets the average merit, then your net cost is going to be $34,000. Now you have to say, is that within my budget? I don't know what your budget is, so I can't say whether that school's affordable enough. But now you can see how the numbers work, and you can start to get an estimate as you're looking at colleges, you know, what the net cost is going to be and how that relates to the budget that we have to cover the costs. At this point, I'm just kind of going further on the example of Susquehanna. I would absolutely still go to the Susquehanna website and do the school's net price calculator and see what the results are. But you can see how directionally, by using the tool, we even found Susquehanna as a school that your student could get merit at and that might fall within your budget. So, and you can sort these in other ways. You can sort them by what the average SAT score is. You can sort them by the school size. And then what you do is you create and select which of these schools you want to research further and maybe put on a college list. So so the tool, there's a free version of the tool, which gives you limited capability. And there's the subscription base gives you access to all the features that I'm showing you. So let me just skip. Once you make lists, you have access to a table view of all the data. So here's my lists. Here's one of my lists. I have a lot of lists that I've made. But here's a list, happens to be of schools with this 1,300 to 1,400 SAT range, and they give merit. And so there are 200 schools on this list. Okay, and now you can see this is the table view that you get to see once you kind of pick schools to put on your list. And we have different categories of information. Honestly, I like to add all of the information to the table. Some people find it overwhelming, and I understand that, and they only want to look at it piece by piece, but I like to look at all of it. So now I've added all of the data that we have to the table, and you can sort any of these columns, you know, ascending or descending.
I just wanted to.
You can, you know, add notes to these colleges. You can delete colleges from this list. You can add them to a different list. So it just gives you a little bit more capability to do more detailed research with the data that we have. Let me point out some interesting pieces of data that might be helpful for you. So we break out, we break out, you see this overall admit rate, early decision, early action, regular decision. Let me sort this by, okay, some schools that offer, yeah, so we can, or let's do this the other way out of curiosity. Okay, here's American as an example. So the reason why we break out these numbers is because the overall admit rate is a blended number of what happens if a school offers early decision and regular decision. And American is a good example. So their overall admit rate is 41%. But if you apply early decision, their admit rate is 86%. So that's a big difference, right? And it obviously would lend you to think that you have a better chance of getting in if you apply early decision. And I think you would, looking at these numbers. The other number to look at is what percent of the class are they admitting early decision? So in Americans' case, they're admitting 43% of the class early decision. So that means that 57% of the class is going to be admitted regular decision, but it means that there's fewer spots, right, for regular decision, but there tend to be more applications. So that's why regular decision rates for these types of schools are lower, and then the overall admit rate is blended. So it's really important to look at all of these numbers, particularly at the schools. Well, this only really relates to the schools that have early decision or early action. Let me see if on this list. Yeah, so here's another example. And this is just the schools on this particular list that I made. Bucknell is also a school that accepts 50% of their class early decision. So it just means that if you're applying regular decision, the odds of getting in, it's just harder. There's fewer spots and there's more applications. So just keep that in mind. That's why, but applying early is important. It doesn't mean you have to apply early decision, because there is a commitment. If you're applying early decision, you're basically saying, if I'm accepted, I'm willing to go. But at least understand these numbers. And if a school is offering early action, I highly recommend that your student get the application in by the early action deadline. It's just the shift that we see happening. More students, are applying earlier, and so it just makes your student look more prepared and can potentially take advantage of admissions officers, quite honestly, that are fresher in the process, because early action is going to have deadlines in November, as opposed to admissions officers that, they're human too, that might get kind of tired and burnt out as they're looking at regular decision applications. When there is a dash, doesn't mean no data or that they did not provide the ED option. No, if there's a dash, it means that the college does not have an early decision option or an early action option. If there's a dash in a numbers case, it's most likely the college just doesn't share that information. Let me show you another section of data that I think is worthwhile looking at. And that is, there's columns here on average, the merit award. So here, let's sort this list. So in this list, again, this is a filtered list that I already kind of filtered from the Power Search. Allegheny gives the most merit at 35,000. And I'm going to explain why their number is 129 and why it's over 100. But basically what this is saying is, like, Allegheny and Washington College are colleges that give every student who doesn't have financial need, they're giving them merit scholarships. So in this case, this goes back to the beginning of the presentation, you could call the merit that these schools are giving basically tuition discounts, because they're giving it to every student who doesn't have financial need. Now, the reason why you might see some numbers that are over 100% is because we use the numbers that the colleges give us. I mean, that's kind of the best that we have. And this is a human process, and sometimes the colleges make mistakes. So, they don't actually, so the colleges don't calculate this number. We calculate this number. They're giving us the components of the calculation. And sometimes they just, make errors in what they give us. So if it's 129%, probably meant that the Office of Institutional Records, where this information comes from, probably made a slight error in their numbers, and the likelihood is that 100% of students are getting aid. We just honestly don't like to fiddle with the numbers, and we aren't able, just from a staffing perspective, to go back to every single college to kind of ask them what the mistake was that they made. So the other thing I want to just point out, I didn't even scroll up, sorry. Beloit is the school that has the most merit on this list. So these two columns are important to look at. right? What percent or what the average merit award is and what percent of students without aid are getting merit. So again, Beloit, you could call it a tuition discount. It's basically giving every student who is accepted and doesn't have need, they're offering merit to that those students. If you scroll further down, Wheaton College is not. They are offering merit, but they're only offering it to 50% of the students that who don't have any financial need. And in that case, they're probably paying more attention to the grades and the test scores that those students have to give out the merit. So I know I'm like 10 minutes over. I hope this is helpful. Let me go through some of the questions and see if I can answer a few of them. But do colleges ever give merit aid to ED applicants? It seems to me that it wouldn't make sense for them to do that. Can you comment on it? Sure. It's a good question, and there's not a straightforward answer. So some colleges still give who have a policy of giving out merit, still give out merit to students who are applying early decision, because they basically it's a philosophical decision that the college needs to make. But in those cases, the college is saying, we're gonna use the same process, whether you're applying early decision or you're applying regular decision. And so, you know, if you are eligible for merit, we're still gonna give it to you. Other colleges do kind of save their merit money and say that students applying early decision, why should we offer them merit? Because they're basically telling us that if they're accepted, they're going to come. So we're going to save our merit scholarship money for students who aren't making that commitment and use it later on in the process. Again, I wish I could say that there was a straightforward way of knowing that. The only way is honestly by asking around. I would ask if there are schools that your student is considering applying to early decision. I would ask on the Paying for College 101, you know, did anybody whose student applied to this school receive merit scholarships as part of early decision? You might be able to see some of that information in the data that we have. I can't guarantee it, but let's just pull up. If we pull up Beloit, and you can look, these are the crowdsourced offers. These are the offers of people telling us what they actually got. And again, you can see we go back, actually back to the 2020, 2021 season where we collected information. And so this is in the order of SAI. So because you tend to see that families with higher SAIs are getting the merit. And then we also asked them, when did they apply? Early action, rolling. And I had a feeling Beloit is probably one of those cases where I don't think they have early decision, they only have early action, but they're giving out merit regardless of when you apply. You can see here, all these students apply early action and they were offered merit. Let's see if we go back last year, if that's still the case. And it looks like this person applied regular decision, they got merit, this person applied early action. So here's, you know, this again is directional, but you get the sense that regardless of when the student applied, they were being offered merit. I'm trying to think, what I've tended to see is that schools that have early decision, but that have less selective admit rates tend to still offer merit in the early decision round. But then there's this in between schools that are kind of like at the that are starting to be on the edge of selective but also give merit, and those schools as part of early admissions might save their merit scholarship money to later on in the process. So I hope that gave you a general sense. I can't give you exact because it's going to vary school to school. Early application has become so common that it no longer gives an advantage. Truth to this, I mean, yes and no. Yes, it has become more common, meaning that when we look at the application trends and the numbers, we see that more students are applying early action, and different schools treat it differently. My recommendation would that your student should still apply early if they can, unless, here's my one unless their grades, they really believe that their application will be stronger because they're showing something happening in that in the fall semester, whether they are doing really well at school, whether there's some project that they want to like share and won't be done till the end of it. If there's some reason that they want to wait to share information from their first semester of senior year of high school, then wait to regular decision. But if your student can get it in early, I would really recommend they get it early. It also, for some schools, shows kind of a sense of demonstrated interest that, this was their school was important enough that there was an early action deadline and your student chose to meet it. Where does the overall admit rate comes from? The overall admit rate, it's just a math. It's how many students applied to that school versus how many students were accepted. That's the total numbers. So that's a combination of all the applications that were submitted early plus regular, and then all students that were accepted early and regular. So that's the overall admit rate. We will send the link to this recording tomorrow. Oh, how can students refine the admit rate by major? Great question. I wish we had that data. That is really only data that the colleges have. And there might be one school, the University of Illinois, that shares it and breaks it down by major, but that's about it. I have rarely seen a school show admit rates by number, but I will say it can never hurt to ask. They might have changed their policies. They might be willing to share. Some schools don't even track it that way, but it's a good thing to want to find. I would ask the colleges if they have that information and are willing to share it. Great. Somebody wrote, looking forward to watching this with my high schooler. Hopefully you do watch this again with your high schooler, because they can do this research. It's just and they should understand a lot of the concepts that I'm talking about. So please feel free to rewatch it with your students. I've seen the average test scores at a lot of schools that are quite high, 1400 SAT. What if the student has a test score that is still above the national average but below the school average? Is it still a good idea to submit the score? That's a good question. So basically, you're saying if your student has a test score that is below the school's average and the school is test optional, should your student be submitting the test score? Here's my suggestion. Most colleges, if they say they are test optional, they are looking at that test score as kind of like the cherry on the sundae. So everything else has to be strong about your student's application. If you're sharing a test score and the school is test optional, the test score is probably not going to be the thing that gets your student in, but it's going to confirm the rest of your student's application. So if you think that submitting your student's test score kind of makes your student's application stronger because it confirms their academic strength, then I would go ahead and submit it. If it's below the school's average, I might not submit it because unless, I'm trying to think if there's any reasons why I would want to submit it. I probably wouldn't. But the general rule of thumb is if the school is test optional, is that your students should submit the test scores if it's at least the average of the school and above. And if you feel that the test makes your students' application stronger. And I have heard from several schools that are test optional. Again, if the student submits a test score, they're going to look at it, but it's not going to be the make or break thing that causes their decision, but it usually validates their decision, whether or not, if they, and if a school was concerned about your students academic record, maybe your student's academic record is average, but that the test score is above average, that actually might strengthen the application. So do we regularly update the information? So this is the month, August, where we start to get all of the common data set information that is new from colleges, and where we will also be checking all of the colleges' cost of attendance, because they've just also recently updated their numbers. So the August is a big data update month. Cost of attendance does include room and board. It includes tuition, room and board, supplies, and usually some sort of travel and personal expenses. Okay, let me just see if there's a few other questions. Does submitting AP scores make or break an application? That's a really good question. Again, I would submit the AP scores if you think it strengthens a student's, application. So to tell you the truth, an AP score of 3, I probably wouldn't, but AP scores of 4 and 5, I definitely would submit them. And if your student doesn't submit an AP score, then that's fine too. And a college isn't actually, we had an admissions officer from Emory basically say, if a student doesn't submit their AP scores, they don't think anything of it, because they can't make any assumptions. They don't know if the student was sick that day. They don't know if they couldn't take the AP exam. They're not automatically going to make the assumption that the student got a bad grade. They just they make no assumption. So it's okay to not submit it. But if it's a good score, a 4 or 5, I would submit it. Is there a presentation just on SAI and understanding that information and how it works? Yes, we tend to do that presentation at the end of September and beginning of October. But if you join our plus level or premium level, we have a library of videos, and we do have a video from last year, which the calculation hasn't changed, on SAI and how it's calculated. So that's something you could take advantage of in the video library. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I will scroll through and see if there's any other major questions that I didn't answer, and maybe include that in the follow-up email. It's thank you for everybody who's hung on to 20 minutes after the hour. And always feel free to, you can send me emails. You can send it to Debbie@Rhodes-College.com. It's actually easier, if you don't mind, if you send it to support@Rhodes-College.com. It's just easier to keep track of those questions there, but we're always willing to answer questions if they're quick questions, if we can answer it within 5 minutes or less. And feel free to use the other parents as a resource in the Paying for College 101 group. This is definitely, it's an overwhelming process. I can't deny that, but you can get your arms around it if you are willing to understand the concepts that we talked about today, if you're willing to do research. And I just so encourage people to do this type of research now. It breaks my heart when we are talking to families at the end of the process and who didn't know that they could or should have done all of this. And they what happens if you don't know this and you go through the process, you might end up, we just don't have as many options. And again, the situations that are really painful to help or talk to families about are, families that have schools that are just completely unaffordable to them. They are talking to us about taking out large sums of loans. At that point, we have to say, really, I can't force anybody to not take out a loan, but we say it may not be a good idea. And sometimes we actually even recommend it might be good that you redo the process and just wait another year. But if you're smarter, I don't want to say smarter, but if you start early the way people are now, then you have a much better chance of getting the results that you want. Somebody says, how do I join the Paying for College? Yes, just Google thank you. You just put up the link. It's Paying for College 101. To Google it on Facebook. great community. Parents there are really helpful. I know sometimes, sometimes they get a little snippy, but it's just because this process puts a lot of pressure on all of us. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. I guess today's only Tuesday. I was thinking maybe it was Friday, but just been a long day already. Okay, bye, everybody. See you around.